Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This video you're about to watch, along with all the ones to follow, will be focused on explaining how various TV shows, games, movies, and books exemplify different aspects of storytelling and how we can incorporate the lessons these IPs teach into our own personal works. Now, while I could go on explaining the format of these videos, I think it would be more instructive to show you what this channel is about throughout this video instead of telling you what it's about in this introduction. With that said, let's dive right in. So far on this channel, I spent most of my time talking about how to introduce your main cast of characters and how to introduce concepts that affect them, like your Lord's power system. But now, I think it's time to talk about the other side of your main cast, the villains, and more specifically, how to introduce your main villain. Getting your main villain right takes a lot of work, but investing the time and effort into crafting the best main villain you can might just be the difference between someone enjoying your work or setting it down and never touching it again. One of the biggest reasons for this is that the villains are one of the primary vehicles authors use to move the plot in the direction that they want it to go. So if a villain feels boring and flat, so too will the story. To that end, one of the most effective ways to keep your main villain from feeling boring is by giving them a memorable introduction. So with all of that said, let's talk about how Naruto Shippuden introduces its main villain, Madara Uchiha. The introduction of Madara Uchiha has always been rather interesting to me because of how vague the narrative is in regards to him before his arrival in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. As far as I can tell, the first time we hear his name in the story is when Kurama tells Sasuke that he has a more sinister chakra than Madara Uchiha. A quick note I have to make here is that this moment is actually kind of hilarious in hindsight because the Sasuke we see in this moment is so outclassed by Madara in every conceivable way that it's borderline nonsensical for Kurama to have said that. Anyway, while that interaction is the first time we hear his name in the story, we actually get to see Madara before the time skip that takes place after Naruto fails to bring Sasuke back to the Hidden Leaf Village. Well, kind of. See, what I'm referring to are the statues in the Final Valley. The one we see Naruto standing on before his battle with Sasuke starts is the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, while the statue Sasuke is standing on is one of Madara. This whole setup is really cool because of the amount of narrative layers involved in this one moment. While we don't know Madara's name at this point, and I don't think we have heard anyone say Hashirama's name yet either, though I could be wrong, we have seen Hashirama's face before thanks to the Hokage monument in the Hidden Leaf Village. So what this does for us is tell us that the first Hokage presumably fought against the other guy they made a statue out of in this area, because if that wasn't true, then why in the world would these statues be here? Continuing on from that thought, if we can recognize the statue that Naruto is standing on as the first Hokage, then we can infer that whoever Sasuke is standing on must have been relative to him in power, and that their battle in this area must have been very important, because again, if none of this is true, then why would anyone have taken the time to carve these giant statues? There's even more symbolism going on here, because since Naruto is standing on the statue of the first Hokage, that reinforces the idea that Naruto might just become the Hokage someday. As for Sasuke standing on Madara's statue, since we have seen Naruto's rivalry with Sasuke build since the beginning of the series, we can infer that Madara was to Hashirama what Sasuke is to Naruto. We can also take the information we can infer about Hashirama and Madara's past and use that to infer Naruto and Sasuke's future. Given the resources that would go into carving these giant statues and then setting them up on opposite sides of this waterfall, whatever happened between Hashirama and Madara had to have been historically important, which means that the ensuing fight between Naruto and Sasuke was also going to be historically important, which it was. Now, the reason why I brought all of that up is because the use of layered symbolism here plants the seed of the idea of Madara Uchiha hundreds of episodes before we finally see him in person. This seed grows throughout Shippuden thanks to the occasional mention of his name, like when Kurama name-dropped Madara to Sasuke. These occasional name drops keep Madara relevant to the overall narrative, even though none of the arcs involve him at all. Yes, I understand that he was the one pulling the strings from the shadows. Well, okay, Black Zetsu was, but the whole Kaguya plotline was just absolute garbage for reasons I might talk about in a future video, so I'm just going to ignore anything involving her or Black Zetsu for the rest of this video. Anyway, while he was the one pulling the strings, we don't really learn that until we start getting all of the Obito flashbacks and stuff, which effectively means that Madara wasn't involved in the story at all until Obito started telling everyone that he was Madara. And that simple lie is the next point I want to focus on. To me, one of the most engaging portions of the Naruto narrative is from the first time we see the masked member of the Akatsuki until we finally learn his true identity as Obito Uchiha, because there are so many twists and turns that are gradually revealed to us over time. This gradual approach lets the plot thread breathe while also not taking away from the other plot threads playing out during this time. In addition, each piece of new information we get gives us just enough of an answer to a lingering question while also teasing us with even more questions. This ties back into Madara's introduction in the 4th grade Shinobi World War, because the audience's growing desire to know more about who Madara is linked to our desire to know more about the Masked Man, because the Masked Man is using Madara's name. So, what that means is, while we didn't know it at the time, Obito's deception raised our interest in the real Madara. Now, before anyone says anything, yes, I'm aware that the context clues behind Obito's identity were sprinkled throughout Shippuden, but for most people, those clues only make sense with hindsight. Okay, so in the story leading up to his introduction, what do we learn about Madara? Well, based on the statues at the Final Valley, we can infer he was involved in some historically important conflict with the first Hokage. Then, based on Obito's use of his name and how others react to it, we learn that he was someone so powerful that his name inspired both fear and respect decades after he had supposedly died. Also, I know that he did actually die after his time with Obito, but the point that I'm making here is that no one in the narrative knows that, so they all thought Madara died a long time ago, which lends credence to how powerful he was, because if he wasn't super powerful and scary, then why would people react this way when hearing his name decades after his death? Finally, the mystery behind Obito's identity and the brief showcases of power we see from him add a real level of danger to his character. So when we learn that the Masked Man isn't the real Madara, the audience has an enhanced desire to see how strong the real Madara really is. Is he really strong enough to justify the fear his name imposed upon others? Is he really strong enough to justify someone as powerful as the Masked Man taking his name for his own? Is he really strong enough to justify having statues carved to commemorate his battle with Hashirama at the Final Valley? Is he really strong enough to justify being to the first Hokage what Sasuke has been to Naruto? Just who is Madara Uchiha, and just how strong is he? These are all questions we have when we see him appear on the battlefield during the 4th grade Shinobi World War. And the only reason we have these questions is because the time the narrative has taken to layer in the information we've needed to lead us to asking these questions. If it wasn't for each of these seemingly disconnected moments, then Madara's introduction into the story would have felt like it came out of nowhere, and nothing he did in the war would feel justified. Thankfully for us, the narrative does have all of these moments, and they all lead up to an introduction filled with hype and tension. Once Madara's coffin appears and we see him step out of it, we are filled with both excitement and dread. We are excited to finally see the real Madara and are inherently terrified of what he might be able to do. Then, after some brief talking between Madara and Kabuto, we get one of the most satisfying payoffs in the entire story when Madara engages an entire company of around 20,000 shinobi all by himself and utterly annihilates them with ease. Before I talk about the insanity of the beatdown Madara administers to the Shinobi Alliance, I want to talk a bit about the moments before the battle. Madara's Edo Tensei coffin appears on a cliff above the Shinobi Alliance, which is a really simple and effective narrative trick to symbolize that Madara is stronger, or above, the shinobi he is about to decimate. When he walks towards the edge and looks out over the shinobi, he is both literally and figuratively looking down on them, and what happens next shows that he wasn't confident, he was simply right. Once Madara drops down from the cliff, he wastes little time going to work as he brazenly charges the entire shinobi force all by himself. One of the best parts of this entire sequence is the series of reactions we see from the Shinobi Alliance. All of them start sweating over the prospect of fighting Madara Uchiha, and even though they outnumber him several thousand to one, they still feel the collective need to hype themselves up with war cries. Madara, on the other hand, does not make a single sound, and this contrast between the two forces adds another layer of tension. Then, once Madara reaches the shinobi, it begins. Madara, a single man, destroys an army of thousands by himself without even trying. At first, he only engages in hand-to-hand combat, but that proves to be more than enough as he kills people in droves while they can't even lay a finger on him. This continues until Temari lands the first hit on him with her wind style, but Madara simply brushes himself off, which demonstrates the worthlessness of her attack. From there, he starts using jutsu, but according to his musings, he is mainly using them just to test out his new body, and definitely not because he feels even the slightest bit threatened. After some more slaughter and a bit of back and forth between Madara, Gaara, Inoki, and Naruto, Madara decides to amuse himself by seeing how their flailing efforts can handle him dropping a literal meteor on their heads. During this scenario, we see the shinobi running for their lives while the Kage do their best to save them from certain death. Then, in a move that set the tone for just how overpowered and blatantly disrespectful Madara is, when the shinobi start to celebrate the Kage's success over the meteor, Madara simply asks, "What would you do about the second one?" The camera then pans out to see that this absolute madman was so far beyond an army of thousands that he decided to pass the time by trolling them with a meteor just to crush their hopes, literally, with a completely unnecessary second meteor that destroys the battlefield when it crashes into the first. And that, my dear viewers, is how you introduce your main villain. Devote a meaningful amount of time generating hype and intrigue about your villain, and then reward your audience for their investment with a completely ridiculous display of power, swag, and general disrespect that they will never forget. Introducing your main villain in a way that generates some level of shock with your audience is a great way to have that character snatch their attention, which is the first step in having them care about your villain. The last thing I want to talk about with Madara's introduction is what happens immediately after he casually brings meteors to a fistfight. Over the course of the narrative, we learn about the leaders of the 5 great shinobi nations, known as the Kage, and by this point in the story, we have met all 5 of them. During the 5 Kage Summit, which takes place before the 4th Great Shinobi World War, we also get to see the Kage we did not know much about fight. So by the time Madara deletes a couple thousand ninja in just a few minutes, we have an idea about each of the 5 Kage. I bring that up because the Shinobi Alliance's response to the meteors is to have all 5 of the Kage team up and fight Madara together. This is a monumental event in the story because one of the main points of the narrative is showing how a world divided by endless war for decades, if not centuries, can learn how to put their differences aside and fight together for a better world. As the leaders of the 5 strongest ninja villages in the world unite together to fight Madara, it marks the first time in history that the world has demonstrated such unity. I wanted to bring that up because it shows us that Madara is a man who makes history. For example, we learn a bit later that he actually created the hidden village system alongside Hashirama. In addition, he was the one who set the entire plot of Naruto in motion with how he manipulated Obito. He was the one who the 5 Kage united together to fight against. Then, after he embarrasses them, Madara brings himself back to life and becomes the Jinchuriki of the 10 Tails and successfully casts Infinite Tsukuyomi on the world. Again, the point is, not only is Madara one of the most powerful people to ever live, he is also one of the most capable. And that combination in unison with his nefarious goals make him a fantastically dangerous main villain, and the narrative does an amazing job of handling his introduction. In conclusion, if you want to create a memorable villain that your audience will love to hate, study how Naruto handled Madara's introduction and how the narrative carried the momentum it created from that event into the rest of the story. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, then I want to say thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed my content. If you did, then please consider leaving a like, a comment telling me what you thought of the video, and subscribing to my channel for more videos like this every 2 weeks. If you want to see how I incorporate the ideas I talked about today into my own personal works, then check out my Kindle Vella page in the description below. If you visit that page, you'll find the episodes of my manuscript that I've published so far, and any support you give me over there will go a long way towards helping me achieve my dream of becoming a traditionally published author. I also have a Twitter and a Discord server, so if you're a writer looking to network with other writers, or if you just enjoy my content, then feel free to give me a follow and join the server. Links for all my social media platforms will be in the description below. Thank you all for watching.